Cops and robbers. Sorry for the position of this video, looking down on the camera. It's just, I'm using my arms and legs like a tripod. So, you don't have to watch it, but I have to. Well, maybe there's people that watch it to get opposition research information about me. Maybe they just generate a transcript so they don't have to look at the video as if they're like 24 inches tall. Cops and robbers. So, and how does that relate to race? It seems that the Chinese are the cops and the Caucasians are the robbers. And the Caucasians have a beard, which is a bandit, something a bandit would tend to use for anonymity. And it's not just that beards occurred. Well, it's hard to say. I think beards, it depends. Well, I think it's arguable that beards are a climate adaptation. And so the Africans have a warm climate that is very bright, tropical sunlight. And the Chinese have a warm climate that is rainy. So the Chinese are pale, yet they also have a warm, mostly warm climate, which is rainy in Vietnam and southern China. So the Chinese seem to have evolved in a warm climate, which is not sunny. And the Africans seem to have evolved in a warm climate, which is sunny. The Chinese have the best climate, with an atmospheric river, what they call monsoons or typhoons blowing in. And the Chinese have the best climate because it's both warm and it's also not harsh sunlight. So anyway, the Caucasians have a lot of bad territory, which is not so great as Southeast Asia or Africa, and with less productive agriculture land and colder temperatures and higher elevations, a lot more altitude in the Caucasian lands. So maybe the Caucasians evolved a beard for the bad climate, where higher altitude and colder climates. So anyway, I had previously said the beard is an aesthetic choice, because the process of evolution includes aesthetic choices people make when they select their mate. And even birds and insects have aesthetic preferences when selecting mates. So evolution is not happening blindly, adaptation just blindly occurring. It's happening by the conscious preferences of the creatures, unless they're a bacteria. Or maybe bacteria can sense each other by chemical signatures, and they have preferences of their own for what another bacteria should smell like, or something like that, or taste like. It's in a liquid medium usually. So maybe bacteria have preferences, aesthetic preferences for each other. But multicellular organisms, especially those with optical receptors who can see each other, have aesthetic preferences. And so evolution is not a blind, thoughtless process. It's a process which occurs with awareness and aesthetic preferences occurring during the entire process of evolution. And that was an interesting thing to recognize. So anyway, Caucasians have a beard, and that makes Caucasians more like a bandit. And perception of Caucasians is like a bandit. Caucasians have bad land. Africans have great agriculture land. And the southern Chinese and Vietnamese have even better agriculture land. And the Caucasians, well, they might be perceived, Caucasians might be perceived by Africans and Chinese, they come from a bad land. They evolved in a bad place that makes them hairy, and they want to come to our good places where our land is better than theirs. So, in the game of cops and robbers, it seems that, well, many times I would say, well, white Americans do a lot to portray African Americans as robbers so that white Americans can be cops. But in the big picture, it seems like, well, whites have some fair arguments against the African Americans swarming the USA, swarming the southeastern USA, the best agriculture land. When the white people finally got out of their geographical prison, cornered in northern Europe by the hordes of the Roman Empire, and then the British Empire got to where they could sail and travel, and white people started moving to North America. And finally, after hundreds of thousands of years, perhaps millions or a million or more years suffering in that horrible climate of Northern Europe, white people got a chance to get some good agriculture land closer, nearer. It's still distant from the equator, but it's a lot better than Northern Europe. Most of Northern Europe is above the border between Canada and the USA. Why is Northern Europe not freezing cold like Northern Canada? Because of a Atlantic meridional overturning current or something like that, that brings a warmer climate from tropical waters through that current. It brings it to Northern Europe. But Northern Europe is a terrible, cold place, which is both cold and not enough sunlight. And so white people finally got the opportunity to get out of Northern Europe and to get some better land. And what do you know? It got swarmed with Africans. How did that happen? Well, the British and the Jews are stupid. And especially the Jews and the Spanish are jealous. So the Jews and the Spanish and the British, all, you know, Africans have a ton of terrific land, you know. And so whites are like suffering in that terrible climate up there in Northern Europe. Finally crossed the Atlantic, got to America, and the friggin' place is swarmed with Africans. The southeastern United States, the best agricultural land, is swarming with Africans. Now, that changes the story, who's the cops and who's the robbers, a little bit. Considering that Africans not only have a lot of land, between South Africa and North Africa, well, there's a lot of Africa which is lost to the Sahara Desert, which is just useless territory, more or less useless, more or less. Maybe someday some people will find some use for it, but from the region of the Sahel region down into the African jungle and savanna region and north of South Africa, that's a lot of good land. So Africans were not deprived, and they have eternal summer. But the Northern Europeans are just suffering in the cold and just depressed, and not enough sunlight, and not enough warm season for agriculture. Finally, white people get out and go to finally, white people made it to America, and the Romans and Jews were so jealous that they completely loaded the place, and the British got behind this too, because the British has a partially Jewish monarchy. Spanish and Jewish, very jealous of the whites. They loaded the place with Africans. That's how it is. So it's hard to say who's justified, and who African Americans are sort of like robbers versus white cops in that sense. But when it's white South Africans, and then white South Africans are sort of like robbers, with the Africans more like the cops. Anyway, that's all for now.